The holiday season is coming quickly, and before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that we teamed up with Maria Acadays to bring you the ultimate planner and journal for 2024. And to celebrate, we are having a Black Friday sale where you can get it for 50% off. This planner will help you organize your life, but will also help you prioritize your needs so the rest of your life can function easily. Head over to howwegetthru.com/Black Friday to get early access, or depending on when you're listening, go to our website to purchase the How We Get Thru 2024 Planner and Journal. But hurry, because it's only on sale for a limited time. Okay, back to the show. You guys, this episode is chock full of myth debunking, but the first myth that we talk about is the myth around maternal instincts and how becoming a mother is all about trusting yourself, yes, but also giving yourself grace that there is no way to know everything about this new human that has entered your life. Licensed social worker Vasa Bertolucci joins me in telling her own birth story and experience with the NICU, and how that has shaped her to become a mental health advocate and healer for moms. She walks us through different stages of birth trauma, having trouble bonding with your baby while they're in the NICU, and the anxiety that can creep up when you finally bring your baby home. It's another heartfelt, tearful episode full of resilience and healing. And if you're new here, you're listening to the How We Get Thru podcast, a place for you to feel connected through deep and meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Jen, a licensed therapist and founder and CEO of the How We Get Thru app, and my mission is to bring you affordable and diverse therapy resources to help you get through the hard stuff, all in one place and at your own pace. Welcome to the How We Get Thru community. Hi, and welcome back to the How We Get Thru podcast. Today's guest is Vasa Bertolucci. She's a licensed social worker in California, and she helps new moms and postpartum women who want to find meaning and courage in the emotions, the big decisions, the transitions, and the new experiences that come with motherhood. Yay, Molly! You guys, we tried to record this podcast like 16 times, and we are finally here. So we are so excited. Yes. Yes. Molly is also a podcast host. You want to talk about your podcast? We love it.
Yes, I do have a podcast. It's called Our First Year, where I interview moms about their first year of motherhood.
So good. Listen, 2 podcast hosts had technical difficulties, but we did it. So
yeah, we're persevering.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's start the show. We like to start off with a new mental health myth, and there are so many around motherhood, but we would love to know yours.
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is maternal instinct.
Ugh.
It's a total myth. And what I mean by maternal instinct is this idea that as soon as your baby's born, there's an innate, automatic, like uniquely female, instinctively know what to do and how to care for your baby. And that's just not the case. It's a skill. It takes time to learn how to care for your baby. It takes time to bond with your baby. It's true on-the-job training, and your instincts are really just you learning alongside your baby. And so the way that relates back to mental health is that with the knowledge that that's all a myth, a lot of us can breathe a deep sigh of relief because we didn't or don't have that magical immediate access to this skill set. And that expectation, like that false expectation that you should, can really set you up to feel like you're missing something or there's something wrong with you. And that's not true. There's nothing wrong with you. It just takes time.
It's so good. I love the word skill because I think it really categorizes motherhood or parenting in a whole different way versus, again, like this innate thing that we have as mothers, which there is something there. But the idea of like popping out a baby and you should know when they're hungry or why they're crying or why they're not sleeping, you know, on top of just being postpartum is so much pressure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've had moms say to me, like, I don't know what their cries mean. And you're like, they're 3 weeks old. Like, of course you don't. Like, you're just getting to know this baby. And so it takes time, and it's a steep learning curve.
Another very good choice of words, a freaking steep learning curve that you are thrown in. Like, you can't really prepare. You can read all the books, you can do all the things, but like really understanding a human, a new human that's trying to understand themselves is really, really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've never done it before. And I'm going to throw in a second myth that breastfeeding is natural, like that it should come naturally. So many parents struggle, birthing people struggle with breastfeeding. Mm-hmm. And again, it can make you feel like you're doing something wrong or there's something wrong with you when it doesn't come naturally. When in reality, like, it's a skill set as well. And it's a skill set for your baby who has no life experience. And so you are learning alongside each other, which is a beautiful thing to learn together.
Yes, another good point around a skill that you're learning and the baby is learning. And I think there's just been this wave of like breast is best kind of situation, I think, for the last, 10 years, 12 years. I remember with my second, I was like, this guy is starving. He was like 10 pounds, 11 ounces, just a giant baby. And I was like, can I get some formula in the hospital? And I had to sign a freaking waiver. Like, and the the formula was like lock and key behind this like cabinet. And I'm like, what? Like, even just the process of that was like super shaming.
Totally.
So I think there's that societal component here where we see that breast is best, and it's just this, the baby pops out, you put them on your chest and everything's fine. And it's like sex in the movies. It's not real.
Right. There's so much more nuance that's just not covered and can just make you feel really shitty, especially, it can set you up to have a lot of negative thoughts. And so, it takes time. It takes time to bond. It takes time to learn about your baby. I feel like we could do a whole podcast on breastfeeding myths, but
yes,
just,
so good. Yeah.
A lot to blow up there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, we are both moms, but I would love to know your story, how you became a therapist, then you became a mom, or vice versa. Like, how did you kind of how did you decide to be in this niche of motherhood?
Yeah. So I started my clinical career working with trauma, treating trauma in adolescents and adults, and studying the impact of trauma on learning. So after I graduated with my master's from USC, I was working for Los Angeles Unified School District and in community mental health clinics treating trauma. And then I had my own experience with a traumatic birth, a NICU stay, and a postpartum anxiety disorder. And so
triple threat, man. Yikes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always say I was so blindsided. Like, and I think about how I had all this context for what I was going through because this was my expertise. And yet it was so difficult to navigate, to even identify all of these things. So that really was the impetus to me working with the perinatal population. I had a real need both to understand what was happening to me or what I was going through. And like, as a clinician, I was like, this is really interesting. This is a need. And then also just a desire to use my lived experience and my position as someone who's been through it to support other new moms in postpartum in their early years of parenting.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Like,
it's the best job in the world.
Yeah, it's so needed. And I think, sometimes I ask on those podcasts, because there's a lot of therapists on it, and like, what's your childhood trauma that led you here, and sometimes it's later trauma that pushes into this. I think there's always that feeling of like, why isn't there any support around here when you go through something traumatic?
Yeah, why did no one tell me this could happen? And I do feel like there's this whole world of support, but you don't, or at least in my experience, I didn't know about it until it was too late. And so there's a need for kind of like more discussion. And I think this goes back to that myth, like that perfect, like everything's going to be natural and everything's going to be perfect. And we don't always recognize that it's not that way. And so just putting it in the air, shouting it from the rooftops of like, it's okay if you struggle as a mom. It's okay if you struggle in postpartum. It's okay if like you are impacted by a traumatic birth. Of course you are. If you're impacted by a NICU stay, of course you are. So putting that out, that piece of like, you're not alone. It's not your fault. There's support.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I love that. And when we were talking about like what kind of course to make for the app, we landed on a NICU experience. And if you are comfortable, I would love for you to share your story. Sorry, I wanted to say birth trauma. Also, like you can start with a birth if you want, or just your NICU experience, whatever feels comfortable for you.
Yeah, I went into my pregnancy and birth, like I now at this time thinking really naively, like what could possibly go wrong? Everything can go wrong.
It's actually really dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But the kind of short version of my birth trauma is that I felt very afraid. It was very long and very painful. And there was a big disconnect with the people that were supporting me, that they weren't hearing me say that something was wrong. And I really trusted my body. I was an athlete. I was excited to see what my body could do. And so that was a big part of my healing from the traumatic birth, was learning how to trust my body again after saying, you know, something's wrong, and everyone's saying, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. And so ultimately my daughter was born after a very long labor, needing to be resuscitated, and then ending up in the NICU for neonatal seizures. And that experience was so tough. It was both like a blur and the longest time. And most of us who experience NICU stays, you know, it's not what we expected. No matter how you think your birth will go, or if you have a detailed birth plan or not, like you kind of picture that at the end your baby will be coming home with you. Yeah. And that no one can really prepare to leave the hospital without your baby. It's a heartbreaking reality for parents with babies who are born prematurely or needing medical care. And so that was my reality. And the emotions in postpartum are so intense. And then you add in the fear and uncertainty of the NICU, and it's a lot to navigate. So when we landed on this as doing courses around the NICU, the course is really focused on getting through the NICU stay, like adjusting to that reality of being separated from your baby. Because it's like, I feel like my brain couldn't catch up. Like the baby's here, but like, where is she? Like, you know, and your body you're going through all the postpartum body feelings and everything's happening, but like, where's my baby? And so it took a while for my brain to catch up. So adjusting to that reality, and then managing the emotions and fears that are so present, and taking care of yourself and connecting with your baby.
There's no words. There's just an ache, you know, like a real, I get like teary, like there's just an ache around that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard. And many parents go through a traumatic birth and a NICU stay. And, you know, I kind of feel like it's common. And so people rush you past it, of like, oh, your baby's home now. And we do this with birth trauma too. Oh, at least everybody's fine now. At least everybody's okay. And there is a need for that space to process the experience and the prolonged trauma of the NICU stay. For sure, that support is invaluable.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing the story. You don't have to answer this, but I'm curious of what you felt was wrong, like in your body, because I just think that's so powerful. Of like, even if no one is listening, I mean, this is the problem. This is the systemic problem around that. But what did you feel was wrong? And did they later find out, okay, this was wrong, or anything?
Yeah. So I felt something was wrong because things were not progressing as they should have. So my labor ended up being 37 hours long with 5 hours of pushing. and she just was not budging. And so I kept saying,
Wow.
as like, there would be these moments of like, okay, this is transition, right? Like, this is baby's going to be here soon. Like, we're ready. And it just, things didn't happen, and things didn't happen, and things didn't happen. So I kept telling the midwives, something's wrong. I feel like I'm going to die. Like, and it was just like, oh, you're a first time mom. Like, this is labor. And so there was a real disconnect between like what was happening in my brain and in my body. And like, I wasn't being heard, and I was being, my pain was dismissed and my fears were dismissed. And then when she was born and she needed to be resuscitated, I kept looking at the midwives, and everyone was very calm, which I do appreciate. But there was like, oh, it's fine, this happens. And babies do not just be born and don't breathe for 7 minutes. That's not a normal okay thing. So, and then we were sent home 5 hours after she was born. And the next day she was having seizures, and we took her in, and she ended up being transferred to the NICU. And so there was this big gap between like the reality of what was happening and what I was being told was happening. So, you know, it's heavy. And so many parents do go through these heavy experiences. And, you know, I want to add in this piece of like the resilience and strength that when we tell our stories of trauma, I think it's really important to include this piece of the resilience and the strength. And it's not that I'm stronger because of this trauma or my baby's stronger because of this trauma, but it is this traumatic growth and this piece that, like, yes, this was horrible. Like, this should not have happened. And we did it. We got through it. And it shows some of the things that I want to model for my kids of resilience, strength, being able to rely on other people, being able to trust your own instincts. So adding that piece too of like, this is hard and we did it.
Yeah. And I think what you're speaking to is just the process of how to walk through that, walk through the birth trauma, walk through the NICU experience, like is holding the pain and the resilience around that, because both were really present.
Oh
my gosh, I love it. Yeah. Where and how old are your children now? How old's your oldest?
My oldest is 3, and I have a second baby who is 1.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Fresh. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in it.
Yeah. Yes. And the second child, did you have a similar experience, or that was a different experience?
You know what? I've never had a chance to talk about her birth really, but it was a healing experience. It was I went in, and you know, they're 2 years apart. So it was a pretty quick turnaround.
It was very quick. Yeah.
I think there can be a temptation with birth trauma or NICU stay, or even a difficult postpartum, to like have a do-over. And I think, you know, you definitely don't have to do that to heal, but that was a little bit present for me.
Yeah, part of your story. Yeah.
And so she was born, oh my gosh, so quickly. I went into labor at 3 a.m., first contraction, 3 a.m. Baby's born at 6:25 in the hospital, and I caught her. My doctor did not get there on time.
Oh,
and that was amazing.
Gosh.
Like, that was a very full like turnaround of like, my baby's coming. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. I don't care what you all think. Here she is. I got her.
Yeah, and I think there's that growing experience as a mom. If you choose to have more children, there is this, like, for better for worse, knowing of the pain or knowing of the experience, or what can go wrong and also what can go well. And I think the holding all of it, like, it's going to be what it's going to be, right? Instead, I think first time moms is like, oh, it's going to be this, you know, and we want that. We want the birth plan. We want it to go according to plan. And that's, I mean, just even a metaphor for life. Like, you can't really plan life. Life happens, you know? And so to be able to hold that experience, I think for new moms or second time moms or third time, fourth, like, how do we hold the experience of whatever happens will happen? And I know I can like trust myself or speak my needs or be instinctual of what is happening in my body. And I think, but in your story, in the first experience, is like, we are advocating, but no one is agreeing with that, and no one is mirroring that, and no one is supporting that. And I think that, again, is just a hard reality for women. I think especially for Black women in maternal mental health and their extreme death rates. It's just not okay. It's not okay. And it's just it's a sad reality.
We absolutely have a long, long way to go when it comes to maternal health, particularly for BIPOC folks. And, you know, I will also say going from that first birth to that second birth, I did a lot of work around that first birth. And so I had a lot of therapy. I had a lot of support. And so, you know, you do not have to go through this alone. And so that's what's so beautiful about what you're doing with How We Get Thru. And what I love about my practice is that, like, recognizing, like, healing, like, making that healing accessible, like, that's there, and you're in charge of your own healing too, like, and you can take back a lot of power and presence and build confidence, all of those things that we want to do as new moms with your healing journey, and that will look different for everyone.
Yeah, and I love that, and I'd love to know your point, like, where you got in your journey of like, okay, I'm ready for therapy. Like, I'm ready. Like, I'm like been white knuckling it, or I've been like, I'm okay. And then all of a sudden I'm not. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. Oh man. I feel like there's a couple of little like turning points that stand out. The part of my story is that my daughter was born in June 2020. So it was peak COVID, you know, or early COVID, I guess, where there was just a lot of uncertainty. And that's, you know, colored the birth experience and the NICU stay and our postpartum time together. But there was a point where I struggled with postpartum anxiety and OCD. And there was a point where I was not sleeping. I could not turn my brain off. I was in therapy because as a therapist, I recognized pretty quickly that I needed some support, but I wasn't getting the right support. I was in talk therapy, which was not helpful for OCD. I could just talk for hours and hours and hours trying to like find that like nugget of clarity that my brain really wanted. And so finding the right therapist, getting the right diagnosis, that was super helpful for me. And then getting on an SSRI, which another myth to blow up. SSRIs can be really supportive in healing around perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and can be connected with breastfeeding, can be safely taken with breastfeeding. So it's absolutely a conversation to have with your doctor, but that was something that was really supportive for me. So those were when I got the right therapist, the right treatment, the right medication. That was like turning a corner, like the lights coming back on, the clouds clearing. And getting you that space, that groundingness of, okay, now I can breathe a little bit. Yeah.
Were you diagnosed with OCD? Is that from the
Not
new therapist?
Not initially. And then when things were not working, I was like, okay, we're missing something. And I actually found clarity on Instagram, like the magic of the Instagram algorithm. So there's an OCD expert, Jenna Overbaugh, who puts out amazing information about OCD. And I saw one of her posts and was like, that's me. Like, that's what's happening in my brain. And that was the first time that I had that clarity.
Wow. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. So, and I tell I tell parents, if you are not feeling right, like keep trying to find support until you find the support you need. So whether that's going to your OB and saying like, I think I have postpartum depression, or I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm not feeling right. And if they don't listen, you go to another one. And if they don't listen, you go to another one. And you have to keep going. If the therapist is not a good fit, you try another one.
Yes. And I feel that as a therapist, like we also don't want a client that isn't progressing, or, if we're not helping them. So it is always okay to break up with your therapist or do a consultation, be like, no, it's not for me, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Goodness of fit, like finding the therapist or the treatment that you fit really well with, that makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel like you can be yourself and you can start healing. Like that's the most important thing.
Yeah. What kind of treatment do you do in your practice?
Yeah. So I treat birth trauma using EMDR, so eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Yeah. Yep. I love it. I love it because, with my own experience with trauma and just my background in treating trauma, I see such amazing things happen for people with EMDR. So I love that. I also use other modalities, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and ACT. I love acceptance and commitment therapy for the talk therapy pieces. So moms who are coming in for other things, and sometimes trauma, but usually we stick with EMDR for trauma.
Yeah. So if a new client is coming, like when is the best time to treat the trauma with EMDR in your postpartum experience? Obviously, it's going to be different for everyone, but is there like importance in like grounding or containing before, or building a relationship? I'm not certified in EMDR. I need to be, but...
We are. So the really cool thing about EMDR is we can do that together. Like you can come in and we will build up those like tools to make sure that you can feel safe doing this, right? And another thing that's really cool about EMDR is we don't necessarily need to talk about the trauma. You don't need to tell me all the details. I don't need to know. Like your brain is doing its own healing. So EMDR taps into your brain's natural healing processes, natural processing of events, and just helps that along, because trauma can get stuck in our brains. It can make our experience feel very present. We say in EMDR that the past is present. And so that's when you're feeling that, like re-experiencing like nightmares, or having a lot of thoughts about the event, or feeling still really scared or sad, or when we talk about this in the NICU, like feeling in the NICU course, like feeling like you're always hearing those alarms, or you're always on edge thinking something bad is going to happen to your baby, or thinking I'm not safe, my baby's not safe. And so in EMDR, we don't have to talk about it, and it doesn't have to be gone over in detail, because that can be really reactivating. And so we can create it's a very safe, it's a very robust modality. Like it's, and there's a lot of, we can do a recent event, we can do an older event, and it just helps you process it and kind of file it away, takes the charge out of it, and turns down the volume on it feeling very present.
I love that. Is there, if someone has, for NICU parents out there, is there this is kind of a weird question, but a wrong time or a right time to start either EMDR or therapy? Like, is it, obviously you just had a baby, you just gave birth, you don't know what's happening. I can't imagine there's a lot of space. Okay, I'm going to go do therapy, or I'm ready for that. But is there like a risk in rushing the process, or a risk in waiting too late? I don't want to scare parents. Like, I'm just curious.
The thing is, your therapist and you are the expert on your experience. And so you're going to partner with your therapist to figure out what your healing looks like, what your treatment plan looks like. So I kind of picture, when I work with my clients, like we're standing at the beginning of this road and we're walking down it together. So as slow as we need to go, as fast as we need to go, as many breaks as we need to take, we're going to figure that out together. it's riskier to wait longer. And we're seeing this a lot more with research that's coming out about postpartum depression. It used to be, we'd say, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders happen in the first year after birth. And now we're seeing with research that it can linger to 3 years if we don't get treatment right away, or if there's factors like not being treated, if there's other factors present. And so it's when you're ready, like when you feel like you need support, is the time to go.
Yeah, and maybe I think for people listening, having some awareness if there's any barriers of why you don't need support, or because I feel like there's a lot of that talk, which I think we're just trying to normalize. Like, it's okay that you need support, and what would be the markers that you would need support? I think in the NICU experience, but then also in just any perinatal diagnosis.
So if you feel like something's off, like there's no reason not to seek treatment, but some of the red flags, the signs and symptoms would be beyond the first few weeks, feeling very like sad and depressed, feeling disconnected, feeling very anxious, so having a hard time turning off your thoughts. If you're having difficulty sleeping, if you are having a hard time caring for yourself or your baby, and those are all reasons to seek out support. And you don't have to fit into a diagnosis to benefit from therapy. You don't have to have had a traumatic birth. You don't have to check all the boxes for postpartum depression or anxiety or OCD. All moms need and deserve support. And we don't always have the villages that...
Where are the villages?
Right? Yeah, where?
Where are those villages? Yeah.
We don't always have, the structure that we need to be supported. And so therapy can create some of that for you. And just having that neutral observers are powerful. And someone to just talk to about your experience is powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost... I made a joke about where the village is, but it is like we are kind of have to really realize that we aren't in communities like we once were. So raising a child, giving birth to a child, it's so much harder and isolating because there isn't a community aspect where we're really caring for the mom or caring for the child. And so it just kind of, it's like sad, like how do we get back there? But I think that's part of the support system. Like all moms should have a support system or a mom group or a therapist or something, right? And I think even just back to my own experience, that there was just, I tend to do things alone. Not that I am perfectionist in that, but it's hard for me to need or to say that I need this or I need that. So I think I just for anyone that is listening, what are your barriers into finding support or finding the village or pieces of the village? Because we aren't created to do this isolated and alone.
Totally. And maybe asking yourself, if I need help, what does that say about me? Well, what does that say about you? It doesn't say you're a bad mom. It doesn't say you're weak. It says that you need support, like everyone, like all moms, like all people. We all need connection and support, particularly around these tough experiences, right? So I'm thinking of in the NICU course, we talk about connecting with other NICU parents. Because there's something so powerful about hearing, me too. I experienced that too. You're not alone.
Yes. And I think another important part that just came up for me is that you were really advocating for 2 courses, which was the NICU experience and then bringing home baby, having a baby in the NICU and then bringing home baby. And I would love for you to just chat about what happens when you bring the baby home, the emotions, the excitement, the fear, because it's all you wanted. And also, what does that mean, and what does that transition look like?
Yeah. There's two courses. The first experience is focused on being in the NICU, and the second one coming home, and I think that needs a bit more attention. It can be really confusing because you've been waiting. Like when you're in the NICU, you are like, there's so much like backwards counting. Like, okay, it's been this many days, and if she's off this machine for this long, then this clock starts, and then once she's, breathing room air for this long, so there's so much counting down, and it's all in toward this goal of going home. So
not to mention how much you have to communicate to family and friends constantly, and like these milestones that you have to have a MD to understand when you're like, I don't know what's happening, but everyone also wants an update of like, how's the baby doing, right? And you're like, this is our next thing. And it's just, I think, a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to even communicate that, because how do you even understand that,
Right. You're learning so many things. You're also becoming a teacher of these things. Like you're having to grasp all this lingo, right? All this medical lingo. There's so many medical staff that you're trying to find out who does what and how you fit in. And yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yes.
And it's all toward going home. And so you get this big discharge. You find out your discharge date. And in my case, it was like, we didn't know for sure. And this happens a lot. It's like, maybe, but we need a couple more good temps or, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in and seeing she was in her own clothes. And I was like, oh, we're going home. Like, we're finally going home. And it was just like this, so much joy and celebration and just like relief. And then you get home and, that stays, and you're excited to get to know them more and hold them whenever you want and change their diaper and just do all the things. And then you're still dealing with the impact of the trauma, right? And then it can come up and be really uncomfortable because it's like, but we're home now. This should just be, I should just be feeling good. I should just be feeling relief. I should just be feeling thankful. And so that can be really difficult and confusing of like, why am I still so scared? Why am I so resentful of my experience? This wasn't fair. Now I'm angry. And so there's a lot of things come up that I think get missed because there's rightfully so much celebration, but there's all the underlying stuff too.
Another great example of holding both in the experience or being open to, I think, the emotional roller coaster of bringing a baby home from the NICU. Like, it's so exciting. And can we kind of be open and be really gentle and caring for ourselves that there's going to be other emotions that either come up from the trauma or the experience. I think you mentioned in the course of like not hearing the machines, right? Like not
the anxiety of not being able to look at the screen and see that her vitals are okay. Like, how am I going to know she's okay? Like, I got used to that.
Yes, exactly. And so there's a lot of anxiety, and I think the realness of what just happened can settle in.
Totally. It gives you a little more space and quiet to process, and it can really hit you all at once of like, what just happened? Like, yeah. So, and then you're also just learning how to parent outside of the NICU. Like you've
yes, that thing.
Hey, I'm on my own, and that can be a scary feeling too. Of like, well, she's always been surrounded by medical professionals, and now it's just me. Like, how am I going to keep her safe?
Yes, another like anxious, scary thought or feeling.
So we talk about this in the course, and then some ways to turn down the volume on some of that, like acknowledging and accepting all those emotions, and like you said, being gentle with yourself and knowing that like this is a big transition, and it's okay to feel all these different things, and it's expected. It can make sense.
And what about like partners to the birthing parent? Like, how is there any research on that or how they're impacted?
Yes. Yeah. We talk about this in the course, and it's really, really interesting. So, partners, the birthing people tend to be immediately impacted. And so we see some of the effects really quickly. And partners tend to be organizing support, being a support for the birthing person. And so we see research shows that actually partners tend to be affected more by NICU stays later on. And there's kind of a delay to them being impacted. And so that's something to really watch for when you get home. Parents of NICU babies are at higher risk for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And that goes for both birthing people and partners. And so, when we think of postpartum mental health, we think of the birthing person, but it's not just the mom or the person who had the baby. It's partners too. And you both are having an experience, right? It's their baby too. It's their experience too. And so however you're feeling, it can be really easy to kind of assume that everyone's okay because you're not talking about it. And so we really encourage partners to connect and check in with each other, because just because it's not showing or they're not talking about it doesn't mean that they're not struggling. There's often putting on a brave face to support mom or birthing person.
Yes, which I think is just such an important point of, the experience, I think, for partners is like survival mode. Like everyone's in survival mode. Like, what do we need to do? What's the next milestone? How is my partner? What do I need to look out for? So again, a little bit in the flight, fight, or freeze. And when the baby can come home and there's some natural rhythms, again, there's that space. So that delay makes a lot of sense. I think also hormonally makes a lot of sense. They're not impacted that way. But that it is a real reality for both parents, because how could it not be, right? Yep. Like, and I think in a typical like heterosexual relationship, we think of men as non-emotional or non-impacted, or, they're just doing. And men depression for men is very real. It's a very real thing. And I just think like, it's not something I think that the birthing partners have to take on. I think it's very clear, but it's something to connect through.
Yeah, and I think, any parents will likely relate to that it's harder to connect after you have children. It's just the reality of the demands on your time and energy. And so you're also up against that of now you have a third or maybe fourth fifth that's demanding your attention and your energy. And so, being intentional about that connection, checking in with each other, encouraging each other to seek help if you see some of those signs and symptoms that therapy or another kind of support might be helpful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you see couples as well?
I do not.
Me neither.
I never. I have in the past, and there are people who do it better than me, so I'll refer them out.
That's how I feel. Yes.
Some people love couples therapy, so I'm like, yes, go ahead. If they love it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. I have a really good friend, Abby Nordquist. She does a course on the app too. And I'm like, you're good at this. I'm like, you are very good at this. So like, please do it. And it's like, thank you for your service,
Yeah. Everyone's got their things that they're best at.
Yes. What I think is another important like reminder, it's like seeking out individual therapy, but if your relationship is needing some extra love or attention, which whose doesn't after children, especially after a NICU experience or a traumatic birth, like you can make that a priority too, or make it a way to connect back to your partner, which is so important because it is that like system, again, the village piece, right? Like we all kind of need support as this new transition is happening in our lives. Like bringing a baby home, giving birth, like it's a big deal. It's a big deal and it rocks your world. And so, yeah, I just think that's so important.
Yeah. And a strong connection, a healthy connection with your partner is the foundation of your family. Or if you're a single parent, that connection with your supports, that's the foundation of your family. And that's how you can be strong and have the stamina. Like that's the word that comes to mind thinking about parenting. Like have that stamina to parent your child and be present for yourself, your partner, your child, your people who are important to you.
Yeah, I love that. One last note or thing to talk about is bonding. Like what happens to the birthing parent, the partner in bonding when you have a baby in the NICU or bringing home? What is that experience like, and what is something we can do around that?
Yeah. So what I want to say, if you hear nothing else on this podcast, I want you to hear this. Bonding is not a pass-fail grade. It's not a one-time event. If you did not get to hold your baby as soon as they were born, if you do not get to breastfeed them right away or at all, you did not miss a golden opportunity to bond with them. And there's new research that just came out about this. I need to look into it more, but we've put a really strong emphasis on that golden hour, not skin to skin, and it is magical. We talk about in the course how it's its own powerful form of medicine, but it is not your only chance to bond with your child. Bonding happens through care, through action. Attachment happens through care and action. Every time you sing to your baby, every time you look at your baby and smile, every time you talk about your baby to the people that matter to you, show pictures of your baby, you're bonding with them. You're building that attachment. Every time you respond to their cry, you're building that attachment. And so it can feel really hard to feel disconnected from your baby when they're in an isolate, when you don't get to hold them all the time, when you don't get to breastfeed them or even change your diaper or spend a lot of time with them. We had really limited visiting hours when my daughter was in the NICU because of COVID. And we had to switch out too. And so, we would prioritize me getting to be with her, and then my partner would not get to be with her as much. And so it can feel really hard to be connected when there's all the monitors and wires and everything. They're small, fragile. So just, I kind of lost my train of thought, but love and connection is
you got back there, yeah.
The more you do for your baby, the more your love will grow. And that's for both partners. The more you step in and care for your baby, the more your love and attachment grows.
Yeah. I think another important layer of that is if you're dealing with your own postpartum depression or anxiety, a similar idea is when you feel better or more regulated or have more clarity, you still can bond and you still were bonding. And so that I love the idea, again, kind of like full circle back to your myth, like there's no like pass or fail, there's no good or bad, there's just like this experience of when you can nurture yourself, you can nurture other people and nurture those around you.
Yeah. On like the soul level and also on just a practical level, like so many moms are like, NICU moms are stressed out about pumping milk for their baby, and it feels so important, and it is important, and if it's important to you, it is so important. And if it's stressing you out, and this is beyond the NICU too, if it's stressing you out, like your milk supply will benefit if you rest, your stress levels are lower. And so the more we can care for ourselves in these practical ways, in these soul ways, healing ourselves, the more we can care for our babies and the people around us.
I have a friend, and we're like in a group of all of us, and she didn't have a NICU experience, but she was like feeding her second at midnight every night or some crazy night, and she wasn't getting any sleep. And one of our friends said, "Hey, you can skip that feeding." And she was like, "What?" And it was this idea of permission, right? She got permission. And I think that's, again, that village piece. And she accepted, like, I get permission to drop something for me, and I can be a better mom because of it, not a worse mom because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Ugh.
So powerful to have
Yes.
that permission from others, from yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Molly, this has been so great. I'm so glad we finally got to record.
We did it.
Thank you, internet gods. Where can people find you? Where is your practice? Who can come to you? Tell us all the deets.
Yes. So my practice is currently accepting new clients, so that's exciting. That's my main jam, and it's very exciting. So if you're in California and you're looking for individual mental health support for postpartum or early years of motherhood, I'm your girl. And I see clients in Long Beach, California, and virtually if you're a California resident. You can schedule a free intro call on my website. And then something I want to point listeners toward, if this is resonating or if you feel like you want to dive deeper onto your experience, something we talk about in the second NICU course is the power of storytelling as a way to reflect, connect, and heal. So if you're at the place where that sounds appealing to you, you're ready to reflect, I have a free workbook for telling your birth story, and you can download the workbook at my website, poppy-therapy.com/birthstory. And then the podcast.
Yes.
You can find me over at Our First Year on all the podcast platforms.
Which is all birth stories, and you have guests come on and share their experience.
Yeah, the story of their first year of motherhood.
Yes. Ugh. So
yeah,
good.
And I love doing the podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yay. Okay, Molly, thank you so much. We'll put all of that in the show notes so you guys can grab that easily. And thank you so much for being here.
For having me there. I'm so honored and excited to be part of all of this. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to our podcast. We truly appreciate you. We hope that you feel way less alone, maybe normal, and have a space to enter into the next layer of your healing. If you felt really called in this episode, or if you're a NICU mom or know someone, check out Molly's 30-minute courses on the How We Get Thru app. You can also start your 7-day free trial today. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next time.